My dear friends, life is not always about changing the circumstances, but more about changing the way we look at them. Two people can face the same situation, but one sees a problem while the other sees an opportunity. What is the difference? It is vision. Our life is shaped not only by what happens to us, but by how we choose to see it. When you shift your vision, you shift your experience. When you shift your experience, you shift your life. Let us reflect together on some principles that can help us transform the way we see the world and, in turn, transform the way we live. When we think about life, we often assume that what happens around us defines the way we feel inside. But if we observe carefully, it is not the outer world that dictates our reality. It is the inner vision through which we perceive it. Imagine two people walking through the same garden. One notices the thorns and complains that the roses are painful to touch. The other notices the fragrance and smiles that the thorns couldn't stop the roses from blooming. Both saw the same garden, yet their realities were different. Why? Because vision creates reality. Think about the morning alarm clock. For one person, it is the sound of irritation, a reminder of duties, stress, and deadlines. For another person, it is the sound of a fresh opportunity, a new beginning to learn, to grow, and to experience another day of life. The alarm is the same, but the way it is perceived makes one person begin the day with frustration and the other with enthusiasm. Life may not always give us control over events, but life always gives us control over vision. The question is not what we see, but how we choose to see it. There was once a story of two shoe salesmen who went to a remote village. The first one called the company and said, "It's hopeless here. Nobody wears shoes. Send me back." The second one called and said, "It's amazing here. Nobody wears shoes. Send me all the stock you can." One saw failure, the other saw possibility. The village was the same, the people were the same, but the vision created two completely different realities. And that's exactly how our life works. When we hold a negative vision, we are constantly surrounded by reasons to complain. We notice every shortcoming, every mistake, and every fault. This doesn't mean the world is darker. It means our vision is clouded. On the other hand, when we cultivate a positive and hopeful vision, we begin to notice opportunities, blessings, and lessons, even in the most challenging situations. Just as sunglasses don't change the sun, but change the way we experience its brightness, our inner vision doesn't change reality outside, but it changes the reality we live inside. Take the example of a student who fails an exam. One vision says, "This is the end. I am useless." That vision builds despair, anxiety, and hopelessness. Another vision says, "This is a sign that I must work harder, that I must improve my method." That vision builds resilience, courage, and growth. The failure is the same, but the vision determines whether it becomes the end of a journey or the beginning of a comeback. In relationships too, vision plays a huge role. If someone we love makes a mistake, one vision focuses only on their fault and begins to define them entirely by their weakness. Another vision sees their intention, their goodness, and the love they have shown over time, and thus finds room for forgiveness. The person is the same, but how we choose to see them that determines whether the bond grows or breaks. If we carefully reflect, the happiest people are not those who have perfect circumstances, but those who have chosen the right vision to live with. They may not have the best of everything, but they make the best of everything. They see blessings where others see burdens. They see lessons where others see losses. And gradually, that vision not only shapes their thoughts, but also shapes their actions, their relationships, and their entire destiny. Truly, vision is not just about eyesight, it is about insight. The way we choose to see determines the way we choose to live. Life is filled with moments where we face challenges that test our patience, our strength, and even our hope. When those moments come, the natural tendency of the mind is to ask, why me? It is easy to look at problems as punishments, as obstacles deliberately placed in our path. But there is another way of seeing them. Instead of asking, why me? What if we asked, what can I learn from this? That one small shift in vision has the power to turn a painful burden into a powerful full lesson. It is not the problem itself that defines us, but the way we choose to look at it. Think of a child learning to ride a bicycle. The first fall can feel like the end of the world. Tears roll down, frustration builds, and the child thinks, maybe I should never try again. But another child, after the fall, gets up, dusts off, and thinks, I know where I lost my balance. Next time I'll do better. The fall was the same, but one saw it as a problem, while the other saw it as a possibility. And that is the difference between staying stuck and moving forward. There is a story of a farmer whose horse ran away. The neighbors came to comfort him and said, this is terrible. Now you have no horse to help you with your work. The farmer simply said, maybe. A few days later, the horse returned with 2 wild horses. The neighbors rejoiced. How wonderful, now you have 3 horses. The farmer replied, maybe. Later, the farmer's son tried to tame one of the wild horses, fell, and broke his leg. The neighbors said, how tragic, your son is injured. Again, the farmer said, maybe. A week later, soldiers came to recruit young men for war, but because of his broken leg, the son was spared. What looked like a problem became a possibility. Life has a strange way of turning our difficulties into blessings. If only we learn to see beyond the immediate pain. In our own lives, we have all faced setbacks, failing an exam, losing a job, facing rejection, or dealing with unexpected changes. At first, these moments feel like walls blocking our way. But if we shift our vision, we can begin to see them as doors, guiding us to a path we might not have considered. A rejection letter might be the very thing that pushes us to discover a better opportunity. A failure might be the foundation upon which we build resilience and wisdom. The event itself doesn't change, but our response to it changes everything. Even in daily life, this shift makes a huge difference. Consider a traffic jam. One person sits there honking, cursing, and boiling with anger. Another person uses the time to listen to an audiobook, reflect quietly, or even make a phone call they had been postponing. The situation is identical, but one experiences stress while the other extracts value. The problem remains, but the vision turns it into possibility. The truth is, when we change the way we look at challenges, they change the way they affect us. Every difficulty carries within it the seed of opportunity. Problems can break us or make us, depending on whether we choose to see them as stumbling blocks or stepping stones. When we train our minds to see possibilities, life no longer feels like a series of punishments, but a continuous journey of learning, growth, and transformation. Our inner state is often less about what happens around us and more about what we choose to focus on. If you focus on what is missing in life, you feel deprived. But if you focus on what is already present, you feel abundant. Two people can be standing in the same room, one pointing out all the flaws, while the other admires all the beauty. The room is the same, but the emotions they carry are completely different because focus determines feelings. Think about a glass of water. If it's half filled, one person says, "It's half empty. What a shame I don't have more." Another person says, "It's half full. I'm grateful I have something to drink." The amount of water hasn't changed, but the feeling created in the mind comes directly from where the focus is placed. The first creates dissatisfaction, the second creates gratitude. And gratitude is not about having everything, it's about appreciating everything you already have. Many of us spend so much time focusing on the things we don't have. More money, better jobs, and greater recognition, or the possessions others flaunt. In doing so, we blind ourselves to the blessings we already enjoy: health, relationships, opportunities, and even the simple gift of waking up to another sunrise. A person lying in a hospital bed struggling for breath would give anything for the very breath you and I take right now without even noticing. What we ignore, someone else prays for. Our focus can either make us miserable in abundance or joyful in simplicity. There's a story of a poor man who complained every day about his old shoes, saying, "If only I had better shoes, I'd be happy." One day, walking in his worn-out shoes, he saw someone with no feet struggling to move on crutches. In that moment, he realized he had been focusing on what he lacked rather than what he had. His shoes were not new, but he had feet to walk, which the other man longed for. From that day, his complaints turned to gratitude. Nothing in his life changed externally, but his feelings transformed completely when his focus shifted. In the modern world, comparison is another trap of focus. We scroll through social media, focusing on the glamorous parts of others' lives while ignoring the good in our own. This focus creates jealousy, restlessness, and sadness. Yet if we use the same energy to focus on our progress, our growth, and the opportunities within our reach, those same moments could inspire us instead of weaken us. The platform hasn't changed, but the direction of focus decides whether we feel small or uplifted. Even in relationships, focus is everything. When we constantly notice someone's faults, we feel frustrated with them. But when we choose to focus on their qualities, we feel appreciation and warmth. A husband who focuses only on what his wife forgets to do will feel annoyed. But if he chooses to focus on the love she shows daily, the meals she prepares, the care she offers, his heart feels grateful. The same partner, the same marriage, but different feelings because of different focus. Life is filled with both reasons to complain and reasons to celebrate. What we choose to notice consistently becomes our emotional reality. If we train our mind to focus on gratitude, positivity, and growth, our heart naturally begins to feel peace, contentment, and joy. And when our inner world is filled with those feelings, the outer world begins to look brighter, kinder, and more hopeful. Life will never run out of challenges, deadlines, and responsibilities. The weight of expectations, our own and those of others, often is like pressure pressing down on us. But what if the pressure we feel is not coming from life itself, but from the way we are choosing to see it? Two people can face the same challenge. One feels crushed, the other feels inspired. The difference lies in perspective. Perspective is what turns mountains into molehills or molehills into mountains. Imagine carrying a glass of water. If you hold it for a minute, it feels light. If you hold it for an hour, your arm begins to ache. If you hold it for an entire day, your arm goes numb and you feel paralyzed. The weight of the glass hasn't changed. It's the same amount of water, but the longer you hold it, the heavier it feels. Life's problems work in a similar way. The circumstances may be the same, but when we carry them with a perspective of helplessness, they begin to feel unbearable. When we set them down for a while, look at them differently, and adjust our mindset, the same problems feel lighter, more manageable, and even solvable. Think about an exam for a student. One sees it as unbearable pressure, worrying about failure, rejection, and humiliation. The other sees it as a chance to test knowledge, to measure growth, and to prepare for the future. The exam is the same piece of paper, but one perspective builds fear while the other builds determination. Often, We don't need to change the situation. We just need to change the lens through which we view it. There's a story of two climbers attempting to scale a mountain. One, looking up at the peak, complained, "It's too high, it's impossible." The other, looking at the same peak, said, "It's high, but every step I take brings me closer." One felt only pressure. The other found inspiration. By the end of the day, the one who carried the positive perspective had made progress, while the one consumed by pressure gave up before even starting properly. The mountain didn't shrink or grow. Their perspective shaped their reality. Pressure also comes from comparison. We look at others who seem to have achieved more and say, "I must reach there too," or "I am a failure." This perspective creates anxiety and feelings of inadequacy. But when we shift perspective, we realize that everyone has their own journey, their own timeline, and their own challenges. Instead of pressure, we begin to feel patience. Instead of envy, we begin to feel inspiration. The people around us don't need to change. Our perspective toward them does. Even in relationships, perspective transforms the experience. When someone disagrees with us, one perspective sees it as opposition and pressure. Another sees it as diversity of thought, a chance to learn, and a reminder that love is not about sameness, but about acceptance. The disagreement doesn't vanish, but the feeling it creates within us changes completely. Life will always present situations that seem stressful. Work will have deadlines, families will have expectations, health will have uncertainties. But when we choose perspective instead of pressure, we are no longer crushed by what happens. Instead, we rise above it. The same weight that could break us becomes the very thing that strengthens us. The choice is not always in the event, but always in the vision we bring to it. When perspective changes, peace enters. And when peace enters, even the heaviest of burdens begins to feel light. We spend so much of our lives trying to fix the world around us. If only people would behave better, if only circumstances were easier, if only luck was kinder, then everything would fall into place. But the reality is we cannot always control what happens outside. What we can always control is how we choose to respond inside. The secret many people miss is that inner change is what eventually leads to outer change. The world outside mirrors the state of the world within. Think of a person wearing tinted glasses. If the lenses are red, the whole world appears red. If they are blue, everything seems blue. The world outside is not changing, only the perception is. In the same way, when our inner world is filled with anger, frustration, and negativity, we begin to see the outer world as hostile and unfair. When our inner world is filled with gratitude, peace, and positivity, we begin to see opportunities, kindness, and meaning even in difficult moments. The outside responds to the inside. Take an example from relationships. Imagine two friends having a disagreement. One reacts with ego, harsh words, and impatience. The conflict escalates, walls are built, and the bond begins to weaken. Another reacts with patience, calmness, and the willingness to listen. Instead of walls, bridges are built, the same disagreement, but one inner choice leads to bitterness, while the other leads to understanding. The person didn't change the friend directly. They changed themselves first, and that shift changed the relationship. There's a story of a traveler who entered a village and asked an old man, "What are the people like here?" The old man replied, "Tell me, what were the people like where you came from?" The traveler said, "They were dishonest, unfriendly, and selfish." The old man said, "You will find the same here." Later, another traveler asked the same question. When the old man asked him about his previous place, if they were kind, generous, and good-hearted, the old man said, "You will find the same here." The village was the same, but the traveler's inner perception decided the outer experience. Even in professional life, this truth holds. Someone who constantly complains about their boss, coworkers, or job responsibilities often feels stuck and miserable. But someone who chooses to change their attitude, to see the role as a chance to learn, to see the challenges as training, feels more motivated and eventually opens doors to growth. Often, it's not the job that changes first, it's the mindset that changes, and then opportunities begin to appear. When storms come into our lives, we cannot stop the rain from falling, but we can change how we stand in it. Some run in fear, getting drenched in misery. Others dance in the same rain, finding joy in the drops. The outer storm is the same, but the inner decision transforms the experience. The most powerful people in history were not those who controlled everything outside, but those who mastered their inner world. They cultivated patience in chaos, hope in despair, and compassion in cruelty. Their inner transformation became so strong that it influenced the outer world around them. So often, we want life to be different, but that the true key is to begin with ourselves. If we change the way we think, the way we speak, the way we respond, then slowly the world we live in begins to reflect that transformation. The outer world is a mirror. It shows us what we carry inside. Change the inner image, and the reflection changes by itself. One of the greatest sources of unhappiness in our world today is comparison. We look at what others have, what others achieve, how others live, and suddenly what we have feels too small. The truth is, comparison steals joy faster than almost anything else. Yet, if we shift our vision from comparison to compassion, we begin to feel lighter, freer, and more connected with others. Compassion allows us to celebrate someone else's success rather than feel threatened by it. Consider the image of runners in a race. One runner keeps looking to the side, checking how fast the others are going. This constant comparison distracts him slows him down, and eventually drains his energy. Another runner keeps his eyes fixed on his own lane, running with focus and determination. Even if others are ahead, his energy remains intact because he's focused on his own race. Life works the same way. When we keep comparing, we lose focus on our journey. When we replace comparison with compassion, we are no longer running against people, we are running with them. There's a story about two sisters. One always compared herself to the other, her clothes, her grades, her popularity. Each time her sister did well, instead of feeling proud, she felt small and bitter. The other sister, however, chose compassion. She celebrated her siblings' achievements and offered support when she stumbled. The result was that one sister lived in jealousy and discontent, while the other lived in love and peace. The difference was not in their circumstances, but in their vision. Comparison versus compassion. Social media has made comparison even more tempting. We scroll through perfectly captured moments of people's lives, vacations, weddings, new jobs, fancy possessions, and forget that these are highlights, not the full story. When we compare our behind-the-scenes struggles to someone else's highlight reel, we naturally feel inadequate. Compassion, however, shifts the focus. Instead of saying, "Why not me?" compassion says, "I'm happy for them, and I wish them well." That simple shift removes the sting of envy and fills the heart with positivity. And compassion also transforms relationships. Imagine two colleagues at work. One feels insecure when the other is praised and immediately begins to compare performance. This creates silent competition and distance. Another colleague, seeing the same praise, says, "Well done, you deserved it." That kindness strengthens the bond, creating trust and teamwork. The workplace is the same, but comparison creates rivalry, while compassion creates connection. Even in personal life, comparison poisons love. A husband who compares his wife to someone else's partner will always feel dissatisfied. A parent who compares one child to another makes the child feel unloved. But when compassion enters, instead of focusing on differences, we begin to appreciate individuality. Each person has their own journey, their own pace, and their own uniqueness. Compassion teaches us to honor that uniqueness rather than diminish it. When we shift from comparison to compassion, our perspective widens. Instead of asking, "How do I measure up?" we begin to ask, "How can I support?" Instead of resenting someone's success, we begin to contribute to it. And what we give in compassion eventually returns to us in unexpected ways. The heart that celebrates others becomes a heart that others celebrate. The irony is that comparison makes us feel small, but compassion makes us feel abundant. The more we compare, the less we see our own worth. The more we show compassion, the more we realize that we too are enough. Life becomes less about competing and more about contributing. And in that contribution, true joy is found. Every one of us faces setbacks, moments when life seems to pull us back, when our efforts don't bear fruit, and when doors we hoped would open shut right in our face. In those moments, it is easy to think that life is unfair, that failure defines us, and that our dreams are slipping away. But if we step back and shift our vision, we realize that many setbacks are not punishments, but preparations. They are setups for something greater that lies ahead. Think about an archer pulling back a bowstring. To someone who doesn't understand, it looks as if the arrow is being pulled further and further away from the target. But in reality, the further it is pulled back, the greater the force with which it will fly forward. The backward motion is not the end of the arrow. It is the very setup that gives it power to reach its goal. Similarly, the setbacks in our lives often give us strength, depth, and perspective that propel us towards something far greater. History is filled with such examples. Thomas Edison failed thousands of times before inventing the light bulb. When asked about his failures, he said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." What looked like endless setbacks were actually setups for the breakthrough that would illuminate the world. If Edison had defined himself by his failures, the light bulb might never have been born. But he chose to see every failure as a lesson and every lesson as a stepping stone. In personal life too, we find the same pattern. Someone loses a job and feels crushed, thinking life is over, but that very loss pushes them to discover a new skill, a new career, or even the courage to start their own business. What appeared as a painful end becomes a fresh beginning. Without that setback, they might never have explored the possibilities hidden within themselves. There's a story of a man whose car broke down on the way to a job interview. He arrived late, missed the opportunity, and went home discouraged. A few weeks later, the company he had been desperate to join announced massive layoffs. Suddenly, he realized missing that job was not a tragedy, but a blessing in disguise. What seemed like a setback was actually life's way of setting him up for protection. Sometimes rejection is simply redirection. Even in relationships, setbacks can serve as setups. A broken friendship or a failed relationship can feel devastating. But often, those very experiences teach us what we truly value, what we cannot compromise on, and how we deserve to be treated. When a healthier relationship comes along, we are better prepared to nurture it because of the lessons we learned in the past. The pain was not wasted, it was preparing us. The truth is, life doesn't always reveal its plan immediately. A closed door may look like a final answer, but many times it's simply guiding us to a better door we wouldn't have knocked on otherwise. The vision we carry in difficult times decides whether we crumble under setbacks or grow stronger through them. if we learn to trust that setbacks are not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new chapter. We can face them with courage instead of despair. Every pullback has a purpose. Every delay has meaning. Every rejection carries direction. When we begin to see setbacks as setups, life no longer feels like a series of failures, but a carefully woven journey where even the toughest moments are preparing us for something greater than we imagined. One of the greatest struggles of modern life is not the lack of opportunities, but the lack of clarity. So many people are running fast, working hard, and keeping themselves busy. Yet deep inside, they don't really know where they are going. They confuse movement with progress, activity with achievement. But when the vision is blurred, even the greatest effort leads to confusion. Clarity is like a compass. Without it, we wander in circles. With it, every step brings us closer to our true destination. Imagine driving a car in heavy fog. The road is there, the vehicle is ready, the engine is strong, but without clear vision, you move slowly, hesitantly, unsure of every turn. Life works the same way. When our vision is clouded by doubts, distractions, and indecision, we hesitate, second, guess ourselves, and waste precious time. But when the fog clears, suddenly the same road feels smooth and the same car moves swiftly. The circumstances outside didn't change. The clarity inside did. Many people chase goals that are not truly theirs. They study a subject because society says it is valuable. They choose a career because it looks secure. They buy things because others admire them. And they live lives designed by comparison rather than conviction. Later, even after achieving these things, they feel a strange emptiness. Why? Because they lacked clarity from the start. They were chasing someone else's dream. Without clarity, success feels hollow. There's a story about a young man who asked a wise teacher how to succeed in life. The teacher took him to a river, pushed his head underwater, and held it there for several seconds. When the young man finally came up, gasping for breath, the teacher said, "When you want success as much you just wanted air, you will achieve it." That lesson wasn't about desperation, it was about clarity. Just as a drowning man has no confusion about what he needs, we too must become clear about what truly matters. When clarity is strong, distractions lose their power. Clarity doesn't mean we have all the answers. It means we know the direction. Think of a sailor navigating the sea. The winds may blow in different directions. Storms may rise. But as long as the sailor is clear about the destination, adjustments can be made. Without clarity, even a gentle breeze feels confusing. With clarity, even storms can be navigated. In personal life, clarity makes relationships stronger. When we are clear about our values, about the kind of love and respect we want to give and receive, we don't waste time in unhealthy bonds. In professional life, clarity saves years of effort. A person who is clear about their passion doesn't just chase every opportunity. They focus on the ones that align with their vision. This focus multiplies their effectiveness. Sometimes clarity comes only when we pause. The noise of life can blur our vision. Constant activity, endless notifications, and the rush of responsibilities make us forget to ask, what do I really want? What truly matters to me? Taking time to reflect, to listen to our inner voice, is like cleaning the windshield of a car. Suddenly, the road ahead is visible again. Without clarity, we live reactively, always responding to situations, people, and pressures. With clarity, we live proactively, making choices that align with our purpose. The quality of our decisions improves, our path becomes straighter, and our heart feels lighter. Truity is not just a luxury, it is the foundation for direction. And with direction, every step becomes meaningful. Life often teaches us to focus on ourselves, our needs, our desires, our goals. While self-care and ambition are important, when our vision is limited only to ourselves, life feels narrow and incomplete. True fulfillment comes when we expand our vision beyond me to include we. When we live only for ourselves, the journey feels small. But when we live for others as well, the same journey becomes meaningful. Expanding our vision beyond self is what transforms ordinary living into extraordinary impact. Think of a candle burning in a dark room. If it focuses only on itself, it gives light only in a tiny circle. But when more candles are lit from it, the whole room begins to glow. The first candle loses nothing, yet the light multiplies. In the same way, when we extend kindness, service, or encouragement to others, we don't lose anything. Instead, the light within us spreads and illuminates the lives of many. There's a story of a man who spent his life chasing wealth. He succeeded, but at the end of it all, he felt strangely empty. One day, he used a part of his fortune to build a school in his village. Years later, he returned to see children learning, laughing, and dreaming of better futures. For the first time, he felt a sense of fulfillment that money alone had never given. His joy came not from what he gained, but from what he gave. Expanding his vision beyond himself gave his life depth. When our vision is self-centered, problems appear larger. We get caught in the small frustrations of daily life, traffic jams, delayed payments, misunderstandings. But when we widen our vision to include others, those problems shrink in comparison. A person sitting in a hospital waiting room caring for a loved one doesn't worry about minor inconveniences. Their vision has expanded, and so their perspective has shifted. Serving others has a way of reducing our ego and softening our troubles. Even in relationships, this principle works. If we always ask, what am I getting? Disappointment often follows. But if we shift to asking, what can I give? Our relationships grow stronger. A marriage, for example, flourishes when both partners focus on serving each other rather than competing with each other. The same relationship that once held heavy with demands becomes light with love when vision expands beyond self. History remembers not those who lived selfishly, but those who lived selflessly. Leaders, saints, teachers, and everyday heroes are remembered because they chose to make life about more than their own comfort. They saw a bigger picture. They planted trees whose shade they would never sit under. They gave time, energy, and love, not because they had less to do, but because they had more to give. Their lives became stories of inspiration because their vision went beyond themselves. Expanding our vision doesn't always require grand gestures. It can be as simple as offering a smile to a stranger, lending an ear to someone in pain, or helping a colleague without expecting recognition. These small acts ripple outward in ways we may never fully realize. Sometimes the smallest encouragement we give becomes the reason someone doesn't give up. In that moment, our life touches theirs, and our vision grows beyond just me. The paradox of life is that when we live only for ourselves, we may achieve success but feel empty. When we live with a vision that includes others, we find joy, purpose, and fulfillment. In serving others, we end up serving the deepest needs of our own heart. The circle of me is small, but when it expands to we, life itself feels bigger and brighter and more meaningful.